Today's special guest, Simon Jefferies, is a former member of the UK Special Forces. Enjoy the show. Simon, a huge welcome to the Lead on Purpose podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
It's a joy to have you here. Look, we've been really fortunate over the years to have a few Special Forces individuals on the show, and it's been a while. And so I'm super excited to chat to you. So SBS, Special Boat Squadron in the UK. Can you just give us a little bit of a background as to what that means for the person who is not familiar with SBS? What do you legends do?
So it's actually, it used to be the Special Boat Squadron. It's a special boat service. So they're the counter, I guess, the sister regiment to the Special Air Service, the SAS. So in the UK, you have a joint selection process. So anyone from any of the military services, Navy, Army, Air Force, can go through that selection process. It's 6 months long, and at the end of it, it's to either join the SAS or the SBS. Traditionally, the SBS is mostly made up of Royal Marines commandos, and then most of the Army units tend to go to the SAS, although it has sort of changed a little bit over the years. And in terms of the difference between those two, to the SBS and the SAS, very little difference nowadays. So in most combat theatres, they do the same job. The main difference is counter-terrorism. So the SBS take anything maritime, so oil rigs, ships, and the SAS focus more on airlines and land-based.
Awesome. Now, I've studied a bit of selection processes for the BUDS, the Navy SEALs BUDS system, and the failure rate's something like 87%. So people that get into BUDS, and they're obviously very good to just get in, 87% of them ring the bell and quit. And so there's a small percentage that actually follow through and become Navy SEALs. Would you say the statistics are similar in SBS?
Generally so I don't know the specifics for SBS, but so through that joint selection for either SAS or SBS tends to be 10% or less. So on mine, we started with around 220 and there were 17 left at the end. One of the key differences there is, so BUDS Navy SEALs, that is people join from a civilian, they're going into, because Navy SEALs aren't a tier 1 special forces. DevGroup, SEAL Team 6 are their tier 1. So from Navy SEALs, they then do a further selection to become part of DevGroup or SEAL Team 6. So they're more our equivalent. That selection process that we go through in the UK for special forces, everyone going on that is already a soldier. So, for my selection, for example, predominantly the people turning up were either Royal Marines, a parachute regiment. Most have done combat deployments in that time. So they're seasoned soldiers having already done hard, arduous courses, and yet you still end up with 10% or less at the end of that process.
Can I ask, from your experience and from what you've kind of, chatting with the people that have succeeded, what's the difference between the people who make it through and the people who don't?
So physically, I would say you need to be robust rather than specifically fit. Something that you see quite commonly, particularly on the first phase on the hills marching around Brecon Beacon, is guys can be very fit, but if your body isn't robust, it's very easy to pick up niggles, injuries, because of the amount of strain that you're putting on the body over an extended period of time. So you obviously have to be physically robust. Skill-wise, you need to be very good, and what they're really testing is the basics of soldiering. So very good at your green skills, very good on the ranges, so your tactics, and this isn't anything. There's nothing secret, nothing special. The things that they're testing on selection are the same tactics that are taught to the entire British Army, but you're testing them in a very intense environment under an extreme amount of pressure, which leads on to what I think is the most important trait you'll need, or one of the things that separates people is the mindset, and particularly around emotional control and discipline of self. So I'll give you a good example of that. The main phase of selection takes place in the jungle, which is an incredibly hard environment to soldier in. Well, it's an incredibly hard environment to survive in, let alone soldier in. And then when you add the pressure of selection on top of that, it is incredibly difficult because that environment is so tough. Everyone makes mistakes. So, if I think about the worst day that I had in the jungle, our patrol was due to go and meet our DS, the directing staff, for whatever the day's activities were. We stopped to fill up our water bottles at a river. The patrol went across. There was this deadfall log, sort of used as a bridge to cross this small river. They were lined up the other side. Myself and another guy went down to collect the water. We filled up our bottles. And then as I was walking back up the bank, I slipped, dropped one of the water bottles. And our patrol commander told me afterwards, when that happened, he turned to the guys and said, "Oh, Jeffries is having a bad day. He'll probably fall off the bridge next." And lo and behold, as I was crossing it, lost my footing, slipped, fell off the bridge, fell 3 or 4 feet, luckily into the mud next to the river. Not into the river, but everything was plastered in mud. So my rifle, kit, everything was just covered in mud. We then had to make double time to make it to the RV point to meet the DS. First thing he said, and it was this kind of grizzled 20-year SAS veteran, was strip down your weapons, show me your rifles. And so I just had to present this rifle caked in mud. And so he just gets out his notebook, and it's a black mark before the day's even started. Those things in some form or another happen to everyone. Everyone makes mistakes. But what makes it more difficult is you basically get no feedback through that process. So you're not really told how you're doing, and yet they're constantly watching and scribbling in the notepads. And what happens to a lot of guys is they'll make mistakes, they'll get in their own heads, and they'll just follow that negative spiral. They'll beat themselves up, they'll tell themselves they've failed, and then they'll quit because they don't see the point of suffering for another month, 2 months, when in their heads they've already failed. And then subsequently, they'll often go to their interview, the exit interview and debrief, and get told, actually, you were doing well. If you'd stayed, you probably would have passed. But they aren't able to control the thoughts and emotions that send them in those spirals. There's lots of variations of that. The equivalent on the first phase in the hills, it's physically taxing, but it's also very isolating, very boring. You're doing the same thing day in and day out, covering a lot of miles with increasing loads. And even just the isolation and people being alone in their own heads defeats a lot of people. So that ability to stay in control of your thoughts and emotions, in control of your mindset, and be disciplined with yourself, it's a huge, huge factor into whether you pass that process.
That makes total sense. It's really interesting. I look at like 3 components with high performance. One is skill set. So if you're going to be really good at what you do, you've got to have really good skills and continue to develop them. But they're not much use under pressure if you don't know how to manage your mindset. So that's the second component, is high performance mindset. And then the last part is this thing called heart set. I think it's just around like beliefs. Like, do you believe you can do it? Do you believe you're good enough to be in the SBS? Do you believe you can make that $1 billion that you're trying to make in your business, whatever it might be? So this mindset component, how do we train that so that when the pressure turns on and we need to perform, how do we train that so that it's a positive upward spiral?
So I agree with what you said there. I include, so I have a sort of trio as well. For me, it's, you need to be able to regulate your state, your physiological state. Like if your nervous system is fried, it's going to be very hard to access the psychological tools that you need. The second one is mindset. And where you said heart set there, I would include in mindset that internal operating system, our belief set, our identity, because it's from that every thought and emotion is elicited from, essentially, and then the action you take off the back of it. And then the third one I put in there is your systems and structure. So in the military terms, it's your SOPs, it's the habits that you build, the routines that you have, and you need all 3 if you really want to get the best out of yourself. So in terms of training this, we need to look at each component. So regulating your state is essentially everything that makes us feel good as humans. It's how you start and end the day. It's your screen time, it's time outside, it's movement, it's hydration, it's what you're eating, it's caffeine, it's alcohol, it's sleep. It's all of those factors that we see spoken about a lot, and it's having the basics of those in place that make a huge difference. On the mindset side, this is where it goes. It's the work that a lot of people don't do. you really need to be able to understand how and why you think in the ways that you do and how you show up in the world, because we will always default to that internal view of ourselves, that belief set that you're talking about, which for all of us has formed essentially since the day that you were born. Most of that, you can almost think about it like software. That's been programmed through our experiences, our upbringing, things that have happened to us, more by default as opposed to us intentionally programming it. When you stop and take that time to really understand how that affects you and then start to change it, that's when you really start to see changes in real time. Most people try to force themselves to do things. They know they should eat better. They know they should not go on YouTube, be more focused. They know they should do these things. So logically and consciously, they know what to do. And yet time and time again, they go against it. And it's just frustrating. And it's because they're trying to change it at the surface level. They're not really going deeper to understand, right, that's why I do this. That's why I'm procrastinating over this task. That's why I'm reacting like this to this person or to my partner. When you have that, you can then start to build in ways to train that, whether that's reframing, self-talk, changing those patterns. And then the last part is building the habits, the routines to support that change. The way I like to frame those is make it easy to win the fight. The more you can do to set yourself up for success, the easier it is to get the results that you want.
I love how you put that. That's amazing, honestly. And it's what's interesting is I find that a lot of people want to go straight to the habits, the tactics, the hacks, whatever. But when you look at like a psychological model, the BAB model, so it's like beliefs, your internal beliefs will shape your attitude, and your attitude will dictate and determine your behaviors. And it's almost like we all jump straight to the last B and want to go like, I just want the new behaviors. I want to be faster, fitter, better eating. But actually it starts back here at this mindset component. So if you're working with someone, what's a great starting point around like rewiring the operating system?
Ask the question why. It's just a really, really simple one. Is whenever you start to get frustrated, whenever you start to fall into a pattern, negative, whatever it happens, something that you don't like about yourself or you don't want to be doing, just stop and ask why. Why am I doing this? Why am I reacting this way? Why is this continually coming up? I'll give an example from myself that when we talk about these patterns and how, just to illustrate how that shows up. So a few years ago, we were moving from Manchester to Bristol, and in between the sort of two houses getting sorted, myself and my fiance stayed with my parents for a few weeks. Now, my parents have been together for a long time, love each other, but they communicate in almost as like this low-level bickering, which is, I think, classic maybe from the generation above. And when myself and Mel were there, one of the first things Mel said was, she started to get on edge. She was like, I'm witnessing a divorce here. Is this normal? I was like, we're just discussing breakfast. This is just how it is. And after a few days of that, Mel said to me, she said, I now understand why you sometimes speak to me in ways that you think is totally normal, and it really gets my back up. And then you get frustrated and angry with me because you don't understand why I'm getting annoyed, because you've just grown up around this mode of communication in relationships. And she's like, that is now embedded. So your belief set is this is how you communicate in a relationship. And when you step back and look at that, you're like, it makes complete sense. And I've actually seen that communication style. It actually came up in the business as well. I realized that sometimes I was saying things that wasn't intentionally abrasive, but was, and that causes problems. Once you understand it, it's not that it changes overnight, because that's what you're always going to do. You're going to default to that. That's the mode that you've used for years. That's kind of built in there. But once you understand it, you can learn to catch it. You're like, oh, right, okay, I can see myself going down this path and talking, all right, just stop, step back, take a breath, right, what would be a better way to communicate here? How can I say it differently? And every time you do that, I talk about doing the reps. That's an example of doing the reps. Every time you do that, you start to rewire that pathway from the old one to your new one. The reason people struggle, like you said, because they just try and change it at the end point, the surface level, is we need to think about these neural pathways as like a pathway in the snow. it takes time to build that channel, but once you're in it, it's very easy to walk it. If you then want to break trail and create a new pathway, that's a lot of work. And so this is where, unless you're doing the reps, you're never going to build that pathway. You can logically know it's not helpful. You're still going to go down it because it's the brain's always looking for the easiest route. And so it's going to follow that path. And so I think the biggest thing that's missing in this space when we talk about anything around mindset is basically nobody treats it like a skill set. Outside of perhaps the military and particularly sports teams where they will hire psychologists to come in and train this, we don't see mindset as a skill to train. We listen to podcasts, we read books, we passively consume information, but nobody trains it intentionally with structure like you would physical training. And the reason when I work with people to see a massive change is because the first time they have a structured, practical system to follow so that they put in the reps every day. And it's why people will come in and they'll see changes in weeks that they haven't seen in 20, 30 years because they haven't known how to train it and they haven't had a practical way to implement that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting. I work with a number of professional athletes and some teams, and mental skills is what we focus on. But I would say 15 to 20% of them are deeply engaged and really go, this is going to give us the edge. I would say 80 odd percent of them are like, I just want to get into the gym. I just want to get out on the grass. So I think even in the sports, professional sports level, they don't understand the edge that the mental skills give you. But you'd look at the top 10% or even top 2% of athletes, they get it. They're working on it. They've got their mental skills coach or their psychologist, and they know the edge that it gives them. So everything, I guess, starts up as a thought, and those thoughts then dictate our feelings and our behaviors. And so how do we start rewiring thoughts? Is there a process that you could take us through that would go, James, this is how to have more empowering thoughts that help you then with the behavior side of it?
Yeah, you can. I think this is where you can come up with a playbook of ways to reframe things or self-talk strategies. And again, everyone's different, so you need to figure out what really works for you. But again, it has to be done consistently. I'll give a couple of examples. The classic one that we see a lot is control the controllables. Only focus on what you can control, which is very simple. And everyone hears that. It's like, oh, that makes sense. But then no one really, they don't see it make a difference. And they don't see it make a difference because they don't consistently use it. That is something you use in combat. You don't call it control the controllables, but with the kind of methodologies that you're using on the battlefield, that's essentially what you're doing. You're looking at, right, what can I control in the situation? What are the strategies or tactics that we need to employ to get the result that we want? And so you're not letting that pressure turn into stress that overwhelms you with a simple tactic of just blocking out what you can't control and focusing in on what you can, which is that empowers you. That makes you feel like you're in control, even if the situation potentially isn't. There's a lot of chaos going on, and the same applies in life. But the only reason that works in the military is because you do that. You drill it over and over again for months, for years, in different scenarios and trainings, sort of training evolution, so that you're able to call upon it when the pressure really is on in combat. And the same happens in life. What tends to happen is people, there's a problem in the business, there's a problem in the relationship, pressure rises, and they want to be able to use these things, but they can't because you just default to whatever your baseline is. And if you haven't trained that baseline with these skills or those mantras, you're never going to be able to do it. But the more you do train it, you come under pressure, and instead of your default going to overwhelm, stress, panic, you go the other way. You're like, well, what do I need to focus? I feel in control here. These are the actions I need to take. And then you take those actions. And that comes back to the point that you made. You can have the best skills in the world. If you can't put those skills into practice under pressure, it's useless. It's the classic of people choking on the penalty shootout. They can be great players, and then they're put in a certain situation and they can't use the skills or the talent that they have, the talent and the skills. Another very simple one that anyone can use. So this kind of comes from training in the Royal Marines. When you're going through any physical training, you're not allowed to double over, put your hands on your hips, put your hands on your head, lie on the floor. Like, no matter how exhausted you are, you have to force yourself to stand up straight. And the only thing you're allowed to do is lightly rest your hands on the chest. And the instructors are always saying, get a grip of yourself, get a grip of yourself. And really what that's teaching you to do is I'll decide. My body's not going to dictate. I'll decide when I've had enough. And so it's a very simple, CrossFit's the classic one. Everyone does the workout and they're just sprawled out and they just tell themselves I've had enough. It's a very simple tactic that you can fight that fatigue, that urge, the feeling to double over or lie on the floor. Say, no, I'm taking back control. Get a grip of myself, take back control. You can use that, then crosses over. Like, it doesn't just apply in one scenario. If we train ourselves to do it there under that physical fatigue, when we're under emotional pressure, or when stress is on, just simple, right? Get a grip of yourself. What can I control here? Two very simple mantras. If you train that enough, you will be able to call upon that in any situation. If you don't train it, you're never going to be able to use it.
Absolutely. And if you go back into your time, say in combat or in some kind of scenario, can you think back an example where actually, thank God, I consistently did the reps. Thank God I worked on my self-talk. Thank God I visualized and, got a grip of myself. Did it ever come to the fore under pressure in combat where you're like, God, it actually helped?
All the time. It makes, I would say every time you're under pressure in those environments, even if you are not consciously aware of it, sometimes in the moment, you are using that. And that's the whole point of training. You go through that and build these internal mental models, those mantras and that self-talk to be able to call on this. So if I'm honest, I can't think of a time where that wasn't, where I didn't use that. But just to quickly touch on something you said when you're talking about those athletes who aren't using it, it's not, they may still be able to perform at their best on the field. Where I think these mental skills really come into play is, in something I've realized since leaving the military, is you can have people that are amazing in that specific arena. So they go through military training, they're amazing on combat operations, but then their relationships are falling apart. Everything outside of that is not going so well. And we see the same with athletes. Because unless we take that same principle of training these models, training ourselves to perform in that environment, and then cross it over to how we show up in our relationships or how we show up in other areas of life, then we're always going to have these shortfalls. And so I think it's important that we look at it as universal. It needs to be holistic. Relationships is a classic one. I think we just think they should work, they should just be, but they don't. They need as much effort putting into them as you would to show up in your business during the day. We need to be doing the same at home if we want to get the most or have the most fulfilling relationships that we can.
Hey, James here. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you know about something. Look, I get asked to deliver keynotes and workshops for teams and companies all over the world, from London to Antarctica, from America to Australasia, from armies to small businesses to large corporates to sports teams. But I go in and deliver keynotes around the mindset of high performers, around the habits of high performers, about how we navigate change. If you would like me to come and speak to your team or speak at your conference or deliver a bespoke workshop, please get in touch with my team. Caroline at jjlaughlin.com will be able to help. I'll also make sure that we put that in the show notes. So you've performed at a really high level on the field. And then when we talk about off field, at home relationships, well-being, what have you done there to try and have healthy relationships and well-being?
So I think there's a couple of things with this. One, that point I talked about on communication, that for me, I would say when I've really started intentionally doing this work around mindset and performance after leaving the military, that the emotional side showing up in relationships took much more work than the performance side with business, physically, and any of that stuff. Actually having open conversations, communicating in a much better way. I think I had a very fixed mindset around relationships. It was kind of like, this is how I am, this is just it, take it or leave it, I can't change, which is ironic because I had the complete opposite in the work sphere, which is a very growth mindset. I fully accepted that to improve, you have to make mistakes, you have to essentially work and put effort into as a result, and you see that change as a result of the process. And I didn't apply that to the relationships. So that was a huge shift for me, and actually embracing that and the hardship there, like the emotional sort of hardship, was the work that I really had to do. I think there's also a piece around, we love talking about performance and the active side of performance, actually doing things and pushing ourselves, whether that's physically or with business or whatever it is. And we completely miss the other side of the performance coin, which is rest and recovery, which actually in the military, so you call it battle rhythm, is built in. Like everyone understands, you can't go on that full on tempo all the time. You have to intentionally build in rest and make the most of that and have that R&R if you then want to go and perform at an optimum level. And it's no different in life. And I think people they don't see it that way. We don't see rest, we don't see sleep, we don't see social, like go and having a laugh with your friends as a performance enhancer. We almost see these as luxuries, and it's not, which is why everyone gets this place where they're going to burnout or they're stressed, or I think the classic is when you don't have enough of that recovery, you feel like you're giving 100% effort. In the beginning, you'll get 100% output, and then you'll get 90% output, 80, 70, 60, and to the point where you're giving 100% and you're getting 50% output of that. It's where you're working 10 hours and achieving 3 hours worth of work because you're not putting enough input in, both on physically with things like sleep, and then, but also, mentally and emotionally, having time with friends, with your partner, laughing, going and doing hobbies, like all of these things. They're not luxuries. They're like as important as the productivity hacks and systems that everyone's looking for.
I love that. Yeah. So I always think about rest not being a luxury, but a necessity. It's actually something that we've got to prioritize. And I'll be honest, Simon, I don't always nail it. And sometimes overwork and get so excited about a project. And I launched a book this year and it was just full focus, chaos. Like everything was about that. And I was way out of whack. And so I needed to literally do what you're saying. Sit down, prioritize your rest periods, book a holiday, hang out with your mates, go to the market on Saturday morning. Because I think naturally, some of us are just driven to produce, to go, to perform, whatever our thing is that we perform at. So I think your advice is really sage and important advice. So if we were to think to what you do now, so you're no longer in the military, what are some of the habits day to day that help you maintain your ability to perform professionally and to perform at home?
Yeah, I think I do understand it with this driven, especially with those A-type personalities. But if you build it in and get it right, I think again a very good sign that you don't have it right is when you need that weekend to it's almost like you collapse and you don't really actually enjoy it. You're just totally fragged out, and then you just about get ready for Monday or the holiday once or twice a year, and it takes you 4 days to kind of decompress before you can enjoy it. When you get this right, you're able to switch on and off. So it's like I'm on at work, now I'm off, I'm decompressing. And then when it comes to the weekend, you can just enjoy. You don't need it to almost decompress. You can just actually enjoy it. And same with the holiday. As soon as you go on holiday, you're on holiday to enjoy it, not to recover, if that makes sense, because you've got that balance, that rhythm, right? So for me, day to day, a few non-negotiables around how I manage. So in fact, I'll start from the beginning of the day. Getting up, getting outside, some movement and some light are like non-negotiable. Just starting the day in an intentional way. I think a lot of people go straight into that, picking up the phone, they're checking emails, they're checking messages. So we're starting in a very reactive way with inputs from the off, which puts you in that reactive state for the rest of it, as opposed to starting in a very intentional way and almost giving ourselves some energy and activity. And the principle I apply here is like moving average. People get caught up in this perfection of, if I can't get out and do an hour's workout in the morning or 30 minutes of yoga or whatever it is, then I just won't do it. Sometimes for me, that might be it might be a 10-minute walk, like a quick 10-minute walk with the dog. While I'm on that, just checking in with myself, doing some deep breathing, just starting the day intentionally. It's 10 minutes. That's all it takes. And then maybe I'm out and then backing into the day. So just having a very simple habit for starting the day. I'd be intentional with my work and my planning and my boundaries. So I start the day the evening before. So at the end of every day, quick 10 minutes, what work's been done, what hasn't been done, what are the priorities tomorrow, what is the first thing that I'm going to do. So when I come in the morning, have that morning routine, and then I don't have to think about planning. I go straight into whatever the most important work is. And I don't I block that time from being reactive. So I don't have notifications on. I don't look at my emails, don't look at messages. I go straight into that work. And then I'll move into more of the reactives, like, okay, what emails, what's coming in. I think people struggle with that a lot. One, because they don't put the structure in place. A very simple planning exercise, like I said, 10 minutes, that's all it takes at the end of the day. But then they struggle with boundaries. They feel like they need to be connected 24/7, that people should be able to get in touch. Notifications are prime one. Like if you have notifications on, it's a very good way to absolutely fragment your attention. I found that most, maybe if you're a surgeon, there's an excuse for having that contact. Outside of that, what can't wait 1 or 2 hours where you intentionally go into your messages or emails to check that, as opposed to having notifications. Also means you can have your phone on loud if you don't have notifications on, and so people can call you. So if it's an emergency, people aren't WhatsApping you, they're ringing you. So your phone can be on loud, no notifications on, and it just changes that dynamic. I once worked with a lady who worked for a massive company. She ran the legal team within it. She went through this. She put it in place for herself, saw the benefits, and then she did it for a legal team. So she sent a memo to the entire company and just said, the legal team will not respond to anything before 11 a.m. unless it is like red alert critical for the company. And the amount of productivity they were able to then get out of that team, because they just blocked it out for deep work before going into responding to things, was massive. Such a simple switch. And people will adapt. Humans will adapt to whatever the normal is. If you are always available, people will expect that. If you set some very simple boundaries and guidelines, people will very quickly adapt to that as well. So basically, I just set my day. There's some other things that, I try and eat good food, just to stay away from over caffeinating, over too much sugar. But again, I'm not obsessive about this. 80-20, just eat the basics. Good rounded meals, stay hydrated, have the odd chocolate bar, get my movement in, do 3 or 4 exercise sessions a week. It is the basics. I think people go to these extremes and we overcomplicate it and we obsess and we think we have to have this perfection. We don't. 80% of the time, get the basics right, and you will put yourself above 90% of people.
How achievable, for everyone. And it's interesting, this idea of the deep work and the distraction-free, scenario, to me is really important. When you look at the research, it says that if you're in flow state and focused on a really important task or project and you get an interruption, whether it's a text message or someone comes in and says hello, your phone rings, it takes 23 minutes to get back to full deep flow mode. And then if you get another distraction 5 minutes later, there's a whole hour gone of you being able to do your best work undistracted. So I'm the same as you. So I don't get woken up with my phone. I've got my Garmin set up and it's just a vibration. It goes off 5 a.m. Boom. So I don't wake up to an alarm. I don't wake up to, tempting to go into messages, and keep the phone out of the bedroom. And then, straight into learning. Like for me in the morning, it's about filling the brain. Like I want to learn, meditate, journal, because otherwise I'm pretty reactive. If I go straight into, and I have done many times, emails, LinkedIn messages, like what am I doing at 5 a.m.? Idiot. And then I go, okay, the boundaries have got to be really, really firm. And so I'm the same as you, make sure the boundaries are there. And the PTT thing, so plan tomorrow, today, I love that you do that. That's brilliant. I think the highest performers do that because they get everything scheduled. It's a priority. They're not thinking and using willpower the next day. It's it's go. There's no thinking about it. So when you were in this service, did you guys ever do the after action reports, or do you maybe have a different name for that?
Yeah, we do. So I'll cover that. And then you said something really, really important there that I think is one of the things that derails so many people. And that is, it's what I said earlier, make it easy to win the battles. Like if you have, so you talk about notifications, talk about LinkedIn or things like that. Our brain is wired for that. We live in a place where we have evolutionary biology that is seeking that dopamine hit, or the tasty food, whatever it is, and then we have industries that spend millions and millions on tapping into that and making it as enticing as possible, not through some evil conspiracy. It's just business. It's good business. They want you to be on the apps. They want you to eat that food. And so if you put yourself in a position where you're having to fight that, a lot of the time you're going to lose. Sometimes you win, but a lot you won't. And so again, it's like remove all of the, take your social media apps and bury them in folders. Don't have notifications on them. So if you want to go on it, you have to actively have to go on your phone and seek it out. If it is just pinging up, you just see that first line of something enticing, you're going to click on it. I'm going to click on it. If I go to my parents, they have a food drawer full of sweets and chocolate. From there, I eat loads of sweets and chocolate. If it's in the house, I'll eat it. Therefore, control the environment. I just don't have it in the house. Yeah, I'll eat that stuff now and again, but most of the time I will make it hard for me to go to essentially make the choice or behave in a way I don't want and make it easy for me to behave in a way that I do want. So setting yourself up to win those battles is what you do in the military. You're trying to give yourself every advantage possible before going in to that gunfight, into combat, the operation, whatever it is. It's the same in life. So on the after action reviews, it's a really, really key point that I think is missing a lot in the commercial world. So after everything you do in the military, and particularly special forces, you will have that debrief, and it's an open forum debrief. It doesn't matter whether it's like a 30-minute training evolution or you've just been out on the ground for 2 weeks doing mobility patrols. You come in, grab a quick cup of tea or whatever it is, and then everyone is in the room who's been involved in that. And it doesn't matter if you're the lowest rank or the most senior person there, everyone has a voice, and no one gets chewed out for decisions that were making. You basically, you call it, you don't argue tactics. What that means is, decisions were made on the ground at that time with that information in that mindset. So you don't chew people out for that. We just look at what can be learned from it and done better next time. So really what you're trying to do there is cultivate this environment of trust and open communication. And when you have that, guys will stick their hands up and like, yeah, I fucked up there. Yeah, I made a mistake at that. It doesn't even have to be brought up by someone else. They'll own that because you have that. And I don't think a lot of teams do. They don't build that culture. And it makes a huge, huge difference to trust, buy-in, like how much people want to work for each other. It's a very simple, very simple action that you can build in for your team, for your company, that you'll see a massive difference because of it.
I think it's brilliant, and too many of us are on to the next thing, and we're so busy to get going. But it comes down to, I guess, the leaders setting the culture to go, this is a safe place, to own up and say, I screwed up, to own up and go, you know what, this went wrong, but I'll take accountability and I'll learn. Because in some environments, it's like you are getting a bollocking, and it's not safe to kind of speak up. So I think the military is doing something right there in terms of, guys, these reviews are critically important. They're mission critical for us to improve. So appreciate you sharing that. Now, I know I want to be mindful of your time, but a couple other questions. So do you get out of your head and onto the page? Do you journal? Do you reflect? Do you have intentional time for that kind of practice?
Yeah, I will do. I tend to do it ad hoc, in the sense that if there is something, if there's a particular, if there is a lot of pressure, or if there's something particular that just keeps coming up for me, then I will get it out of my head and really dig into it, because it's much easier to do that than us just being in our heads and floating around. Once you get it out of your head onto paper in black and white, it's much easier to bring perspective to it. And I think that's probably the key word, is bringing perspective. Because what happens is, going back to that point on our beliefs, we color everything with our own lens, our own bias. And what we really want to do is step back from it and go, right, hang on a minute, what's the actual truth of the situation? What am I projecting onto it? And what is the actual kind of truth? And step back as much as we can and look at it from that third party perspective. Because really what you're doing there is, if a friend shares their problems with you, it's much easier for you to see the answer. And often we aren't able to do that for ourselves. So you're basically doing that. You're getting out of your own head and looking at it from a perspective, like separate from the emotions. We're trying to step out of those thoughts and emotions.
Yeah, detaching from it. I really like that. That's cool. And super tactical. You mentioned something a little while ago about some deep breaths. So I know that like arousal control through breath work is just so powerful. What are some of the things that you do? Is there any specific breath work that you like to get you keyed up or to get you down regulated?
So this is such a key point, James. I don't know whether the hardest thing I find in this sphere to get across to people is that high performance, elite performance, however you want to call it, is the basics done consistently well. There's no magic thing you're missing that some people have that you don't. Breathwork's a really good example. Sounds boring. We all breathe anyway. Like, how much can that really make a difference? It makes a massive. There's a reason every military unit, every sports team in the world now is training their personnel, their players in breathwork.
Mm-hmm.
England after the Euros recently did much better in the penalty shootouts than they ever had. And it subsequently came out they've done a lot of work around breathwork. It's a funny old thing. It is the simplest and fastest way to tap into your sympathetic nervous system, which controls our stress response and how stressed we feel, or whether we're more in fight or flight, or that rest and digest, has a huge impact on our thoughts and emotions and how we're showing up. So for me, in general, trying to be aware of my breath work. So deep, slow breaths in through the nose, out through the nose, from the belly, as opposed to chest breathing through the mouth, which is what a lot of people do, which is suboptimal. It's just that very easy way to stay in that calm state. Box breathing, I think, is a great one, taught in the military, taught in sports teams, a very simple one. So I will use that a lot before going on stage. Public speaking, everyone gets nerves. I still get it. Really intentionally focusing on my breath work to calm that nervous system down, which allows me to then take control of my thoughts and emotions and then go and show up at my best. It makes a massive difference. Very simple one that people can take away. And I think this, to me, highlights that difference between people who train the basics and people who don't. Everyone goes into a shop, or they get in a queue, or in the airport, whatever it is. Whenever people are sitting in the queue, the first thing everyone does is get their phone out. Instead of doing that, just take 2 minutes and just check in with yourself and just essentially focus on your breathing, which really is just meditation. That's what we're doing, is just checking in with ourselves and concentrating on our breath. I know it is more than that, but very simplified. If you add that up, think of all the moments of the amount of time that you stood in queues, and either you scroll and shit on your phone, or you just take a couple of minutes and check in with yourself. That is going to add up to make a huge difference on how you feel, how you perform, and how you go about your day. So, but it sounds boring. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. It's not this big thing that you can do. That is not high. High performance are the small decisions and actions you take every single day that add up, that compound effect, to essentially define how you feel, how you perform, how you live, really.
I'm with you. I've been working for the last 8 weeks one-to-one with a breathwork coach because I'm very curious, and I've used breathwork and meditation for years, but I don't think I'm an expert. And it's like, I want to learn from someone who's like deeply studied, and it's been phenomenal just understanding what it looks like to get yourself into a really quite a stressed state using your breath, and then managing through psychology and breath to get yourself back down to a down-regulated state. So you're preaching to the converted for sure. So I appreciate you sharing that. A couple of things. So one, before I ask you the last question, where can people come and connect with you if they want to learn more and follow your journey?
The easiest ones are social media: LinkedIn, Simon Jefferies, Instagram, The Natural Edge, and then the website, thenaturaledge.com, the easiest places.
Amazing. We'll put that in the show notes as well. So the listener or the viewer goes straight to the show notes. You can go and check out Simon's amazing work. And Simon, one last question. So I ask this of everyone. So over the last 5-6 years, every single guest, just their unique perspective on this. So if we were to fast forward many years into the future, and you're highly aware it's the very last day here on Earth, and someone very young that you love, maybe it's by then a grandchild or maybe even a great-grandchild, they come into the room and say, Simon, how do I go about leading my life on purpose? What might you say to them?
I would say the more you can align who you truly are with how you're showing up, so your actions, the path that you're following, the more happiness, satisfaction, and more enjoyable life you're going to find. I think so many of us get trapped into doing things because we think we should be doing them, or because what they look like to other people, as opposed to who we really are and following that path. I think the more you can do that in your relationships, in the work that you're doing, in your hobbies, just being, and again, we get told that advice all the time, but being yourself. But the more you can actually do that, and it kind of comes back to what we were talking about, is just taking that time to stop and really ask, like, who am I? how do I want my life to look? What do I want to be doing? Instead of just being on the treadmill, we go through school, we get into jobs, life just happens, and we kind of use that to retrospectively assign who we are, and we just kind of just pushed along. It's flipping it and just taking back control, which to me is the highest. It can be hard because you have to hold up the mirror and you have to ask some hard questions and be honest with yourself. But if you can do that, you're going to get to the end and there's going to be much lower chance of you having regrets, which is all really any of us are looking for.
100%. Simon, I've honestly just loved this today. And I think many people, when they hear special forces and ex-special forces, they're like, it's fast, it's hard, it's hustle, it's aggressive, let's go. What I've heard today, it's the opposite. It's get clear on what you want, get clear on why you want it, make space to reflect, take the time to learn from your mistakes, nurture the things that are important. So the rest, the recovery, the relationships. So it's been really enlightening. I've really resonated strongly with your message, and I'm sure that the listeners will too. So I'll encourage them all to come and connect in with you, follow you. And you're based in the UK, but I know that you serve the globe. So I want to just say huge thanks again. And the door's always open. If you ever want to come back on and talk about anything else and go deep on anything specific, it was just a joy to have you. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, James.